All right, hello everyone. So today we are going to cover the basics of today we are going to cover the interview questions on REST integration and in integration overall. I hope you guys have gone through the video of basics of REST integration, the crash course I pinged you on the WhatsApp. So see, from that, if you see, I'll just explain a couple of basic things first, and then we will go through the question. So if you have seen that, you might have seen few things um, in that video is that there are just a second right now. Okay, so you might have seen few things. One is the call out, and you must have seen somewhere is that you are exposing your API. Okay, so one system will be doing the call out, and one system will be exposing their API. Exposing their API means that they're allowing their endpoint to be hit by some other third party system. So there are two things. One is the call out is the thing when you call any third party API is nothing but a URL. So this URL is nothing but an API. If you are able to call this URL from Salesforce, then this becomes the API endpoint of Canva, and you can directly hit it from Salesforce. So from Salesforce you will be doing the call outs to Canva, and Canva must have exposed this API in order for Salesforce to be able to hit this endpoint directly. Okay, that is the basic communication through the integration happens, is that one system do the call out and the other system exposes their API. Okay, so if I try to draw it, which is not working properly. Okay. So this is the system which is doing the call outs. Okay, and this is the system which is exposing their API. Okay, and this is the system which is doing the call outs. So the system which is exposing their API need to provide endpoints. Okay, this system need to provide the endpoint, and this system need to call that endpoint. Okay, the system need to call that endpoint. Now, you cannot directly call any endpoint in Salesforce. If you want to call that endpoint, you have to add that endpoint in the remote site setting. Okay, remote site setting you have to use in order to call the endpoint. And the system who is providing their endpoint, this system need to make sure that the other system is authorized and authenticated properly. So from here, you need to create the connected app. So connected app you create on a system which is exposing their API, whereas remote site setting you add on the system which is doing the call out. Okay, any doubt in this, guys? A system which is doing the call out will add the remote site setting, and the system which is exposing their API will add a connected app. And by the connected app, you decide which auth mechanism you are going to use and what will be the authentication. So if you are using OAuth, you will get the client secret and consumer key. You have to provide that client secret and consumer key to other systems so that other system can call you. So by creating a connected app, you will basically allow other system to be able to access your endpoint. Okay. Now, sometimes instead of remote site setting, there is better option available, because in the remote site setting, you just add the third party endpoint, but then authentication and authorization is something which you have to deal manually. Like you have to provide the client secret and consumer key and username and password manually. So to avoid that, we sometimes create named credential. Okay. Which is a better way of doing the authentication. Name credentials are better way. And before name credential, you have to create one auth provider as well. Okay. So in the auth provider, you will just select which authentication mechanism you want, username and password and everything. And in the actual code, you need not to do that again and again. So from the basics, you understand that there are two things. One is doing the call out, one is exposing your API. The system which do the call outs add the remote site setting or the name credential. Okay, and the system which is exposing their API create the connected app on their side, and that connected app decides what kind of access the other party system will have on your system. Like, you do not want everybody, any other third party system to be able to delete something on your Salesforce org, right? So in that case, you will create a connected app and provide a limited access to the third party system. Okay, if you want them to have a permission to do anything on your org, you will provide the full access. There are different access types available. Okay, which I will explain you uh, by opening the Salesforce. So let me see. And in a real time project, they will, I mean, Salesforce will be on one side of integration. The other side will always be a different system. It could be SAP, it could be any other tool the company is using. So if you have to first decide whether you are going to do call outs from Salesforce or you are going to expose your APIs. Okay, what is the requirement? Okay, in the integration, whenever an integration project comes, it is very important that you do a lot of brainstorming, like how the integration will start, what is the basic need of integration, what will be the trigger points of integration, when the integration will trigger, and what data is required from the Salesforce side, or if we need to fetch data from any other third-party system, what data we need to fetch, when we need to fetch. Trigger point mean basically when do we need to get the data? Is it going to be automatically, or we, let's say, just when we click on a button, then we get the data? So all these basic brainstorming thing happens when we get an integration project, and integration project requires a lot of planning. The actual implementation of integration might take less time, but the planning takes obviously more time. Okay. All right. So let's say we are exposing our API. So in that case, I will create a connected app. How do we create a connected app? We go to App Manager, and from here we can create a new connected app. Connected app basically means that we are allowing someone else to be able to call our Salesforce org. Okay. And here you can write down anything, let's say uh, test connected app, whatever you can see. And here from API enable auth setting, you enable it, and then here you will see what kind of access you can see. These are the available scopes you can provide. Okay, so these are the different permissions you can allow third party to. And if you want to give the full access, you can give the full access. Okay, if you want to give only the API access, you can give only the API access. So it depends on what you want. And see, you will not be doing full access in a real project. You will first need to determine what kind of access they require, for what reason they will be needing this, and then you can provide the access. Most of the time we provide the manage user data via API, manage data via API. And that's it. That's how we're going to save it. It will take some time. And once it is saved, it will give you a consumer key and secret token. Okay, that consumer key and secret token is something which you need to give to the other party so that they can use that in the integration. Okay, when they do the call outs, they will be needing the client secret and client token. Okay, consumer key and secret, they will be needing when they do the call outs. Okay, so that is why we have created a connected app here. If we see now, see, these all are already created connected app. They all are the third party system who can, access Salesforce. We have created the test app. Just wait. So this is how we create a connected app, and there and then this is when you have to expose your API. When I say we have to expose our API, basically means is that we have written a class where we have provided the endpoint, provided the the URL, and we have added the get method or post method, all the different REST methods available, so that someone else can use them, someone else can access them and get the desired outcome out of that. When we do call outs, what we mean is that we are doing the call outs like we are writing the HTTP class where we will be sending some request to a third party system. We need to have the endpoints to make the call out. Okay. So if I show you the sample code to expose Salesforce REST API. See, so here, if you see this example, what we have done is that we have created a class, my REST resource, and this is the endpoint. So someone need to have, I mean, the third party system need to have this endpoint. Obviously, it need to be pre-appended with the Salesforce URL and then at the rate slash an account. And what we have done is that if somebody use this endpoint and call our method, do delete method, then he will be able to delete a particular account from my Salesforce database. If somebody, call this get method, then he will be able to get the information related to this account. Okay. And which account he will be getting? He will be passing the account ID from their system. He will be passing the account ID from their system, and we will get that account ID from the request URL. So on the request URL, they will be appending the account ID, and then they can actually get the account detail, or they can actually delete the account, or they can actually create a new account as well. So here in this case, they will be able to create a new account if they call the do post method. Okay. That is how you expose your API. This is called the exposing your API. Okay, this is how you have created an API. We have three different methods, and that is how you are going to access it. So this is the URL. Okay. All right. Whenever you create a global class with @REST resource and notation, that means you are exposing your API. And URL mapping means this is going to be the custom endpoint for that API which you are exposing. And these are different methods. So HTTP delete basically is for the delete. HTTP get is basically to get a record, and HTTP post is something when some third party system want to post some data to you, and then you can use that data to insert something. Okay, and we will cover this in detail. This has couple of interview questions, so I just wanted to show you the basic structure of it, and then we can go through the questions of it. And if we now see, this is how you expose your API and how you will call the API, like how you are doing going to do the call outs. So call out. I very rarely use Trailhead, so don't. Okay, now if I show you the callout code, so this is the callout code. What we do is that we create a new HTTP class, then instance of HTTP class, and then we have different methods available: request method and response method. On the request, we set the endpoint. So this is the API endpoint we need to call. This is the method name. So someone must have created a get method in this endpoint so that we can get the details out of it. So you have seen how we create a get method and how we create the endpoint. Someone must have created this endpoint and this get method so that we can get the data. So that is how we get the data here in the response. When we send this request, we will get a response in return. There are different status codes we get. If it is 200, that means the request response is successful. We are able to get the data and we kind of use that data. So we were only able to use this get method and this endpoint because in this app or in this Heroku app, someone has created a get method and has provided the endpoint URL for us to use. Otherwise, we would not have been able to do that because this endpoint is as of unprotected endpoint. There is no authentication and authorization. Otherwise, we also needed to add some authentication and authorization related information, which is client ID, client secret, and username and password. So we need to set the header. We need to set all those things as well, along with endpoint and the set method. So that is why when I say that we learn from, Trailhead, that is very basic, is because when you do this, you will get nothing, no idea about the authentication and authorization, because this is an unprotected endpoint and there is no authentication and authorization endpoint. But what they're saying is that you need to authorize the endpoint to call out. You can check out this section as well. Similar to get, we have a post method. Post method basically requires you to pass some data as well. So in the post, you will have a set body parameter as well. So you can set the body of it and then you can send the data. Basically, you are passing this data so that you can create a record, or the third party system, this system might be able to use this data to create a record in their database. That's it. This is the full code of it. Okay. If you see this is the full code of it. This is your class, this is your method. Okay, here you have created an instance of HTTP, a request, set the endpoint, set the method type, and then send that request. This is going to be the standard for every HTTP call out, and you need to remember that. Okay, first you will create the instance of HTTP class, and then its request class, and then response class. Okay, in the request, you will set the endpoint, set the method, set the body, whatever we want to. And this is how you're going to get the response when you send a request. Okay, this is get method. Similar to this, this is the post method, which will require a body parameter as well. Okay, and that's how you're gonna. So I also request you all to do this. If you have not done it already, I want you all to do this, because when we say in an interview that we know the basics of integration, this, at least this much basics we should know, which is available in the Trailhead, and we should be able to explain them, that yes, how we do the call outs or how we expose our API. So this much basics we should be able to explain in an interview. Okay, now let's talk about the questions.
Sir, in the real time scenario, like we use this kind of things only, right? Or like other things are there as well.
Basic structure remains same even in the real-time world as well. But as I told you, authentication and authorization will be different. You have to provide the authentication and authorization in a different way. but basic structure like how we do the callouts and how we expose our API remains same. So you have to create the instance of HTTP class, you have to create an instance of HTTP request and response classes and set the body, set the parameter, set the method type. Everything will remain same. It's just that it will have additional authentication and authorization related information. Okay. And what kind of code will be added based on authentication on and authorization depends on which authentication and authorization mechanism you are using. If you are just using name credential, then it will have only username and password. If it is auth 2.0, then it will have client secret, client token, and your username and password. If it has name credentials and everything, then things become automated and very simple, which I'll show you. Okay. But basic structure remains same, even if even a very hardcore integration will also have these things, like you will have to create the HTTP request and response classes. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Just the authentication and authorization related information will be added if the integration, see, because the other system, the integration is basically the two systems. Okay. The other system need to be compatible with Salesforce as well, right? And other system need to make sure that it understand the authentication and authorization provided by Salesforce, and Salesforce should be able to understand what they, if those two systems are not compatible directly, then we will have to find another way to do that. In that case, we can use middlewares or something. Like, let's say your system does not understand the authentication protocol provided by the third party system, and your third party system does not understand auth 2.0, then they will not be able to provide you client secret and client token. You will not be able to use name credentials. So in that case, then you will have to find out like what you're going to use to make sure that two systems are compatible.
Okay, sir. But Salesforce is able to read or get all the other authentication and authorization, right?
No, no, not all the, but yes, most of the majority of the authentication Salesforce is able to understand. And I'll show you what are the things Salesforce is able to understand. So it works with all the good systems, all the systems which are which are scalable systems. Salesforce understand everything. And after the advancement of MuleSoft, the integration has become really easy, and the MuleSoft in the middle handles each and everything related to the data mapping, related to the authentication and authorization. That makes things very simple. So earlier we used to do a lot of point-to-point integration. Like if you have to connect between Salesforce and SAP, we directly connect Salesforce and SAP earlier. But now we never do that. I mean, very rarely you will see a point-to-point integration. Most of the time you will see an integration where there is a middleware involved in a real projects. No company is going ahead like point-to-point integration because those are not scalable. Whereas middleware integration is very scalable in terms that, let's say, your Salesforce is now connected with SAP. In future, now, if you have to connect with, let's say, another tool called ServiceNow, you need not to change a lot of things from Salesforce, and MuleSoft will be able to take care of adding it to ServiceNow as well. So you need not to do a lot of heavy lifting when you scale your system up, or when you add or couple of other tools in the system as well. So that's how we do. We hardly do point-to-point integration nowadays. I'm just explaining you so that you understand how to do the callouts and how to expose your API, because that remains same. If there is a middleware in between, then you will be calling the middleware endpoint instead of the third-party endpoint. So third-party endpoint will change. That's it, and everything will remain same from your end. And the third-party and the MuleSoft or any other, let's say you are using the Dell Boomi or any other middleware, that middleware will take care of when to send that data to the third party system. If there is any data mapping need to be done in between, then that system will be taking care of that. Okay. And MuleSoft and other these other integration middlewares also have different plugins or different you can say webhooks available, which will fetch the data automatically whenever the data changes. So sometimes you need not to even do the call outs. They'll be able to fetch that data automatically. They can set up an alert in the system, is that whenever account changes, pull the data from the account and push that data to SAP. So they can do all these things as well. We need not to do anything. What we need to do is that we need to have a middleware in between, and we need to provide them access. So we need to create a user which should have the access, proper access to get the account data. That's it. And they'll be able to do everything automatically. It is that automated in current scenarios.
So like nowadays, like we most of the time use MuleSoft or other middleware services.
Yep, most of the large organization will definitely have one middleware in between. My company has multiple middleware. So my company has Workato, my company has MuleSoft, my company has Zapier, my company has one other middleware. So sometimes we have calls to determine which middleware will be best to use if we have to do some integration. So recently I've done an integration with Salesforce and Ironclad, and for that MuleSoft was not very good choice. We went ahead with Workato. So Workato did all the integration, and we were hitting the endpoints of Workato, and Workato was doing all the integration for us. So sometimes we have MuleSoft is not I mean, any product of Salesforce is not very uh, cost effective in a sense that sometimes company thinks about the costing as well of a particular product, and if any cheaper alternative is available in the market. So sometimes company will, from the price point of view, may think, but otherwise MuleSoft is a very capable tool. I have used MuleSoft in one of my integration between two Salesforce orgs here, and MuleSoft is working really good. And MuleSoft gets, even if there is an error or something, MuleSoft gets those errors in a detailed format. So it is very easy to debug those things in the MuleSoft. I have worked on the MuleSoft around 2018 as well, 17, last of 17, beginning of 18, when MuleSoft was not part of Salesforce. Salesforce did not acquire MuleSoft that time. So even then MuleSoft was really good. And I have also used a couple of other middlewares like Dell Boomi or anything. So one thing I want to clearly tell you is that you need not to learn these things for now. It's not like if you are a Salesforce developer, you need to know the middleware as well. See, middleware is not your responsibility. You can provide them what they want. So they most of the time will be needing access, user of Salesforce, and sometimes permission related thing, like they'll say that they are not able to access account, or they are not able to see the account field and all. So you can work on their profile and check if everything is fine or not. But it's not like as a Salesforce developer, you need to know the middleware as well. If you know, that is an added advantage, but that is not the job. That is not your job, because middleware is part of middleware team. You will not be working on the middleware team. You are on the Salesforce part. So on your part, your responsibility will be to send data to the middleware. If that data is received by the middleware, your job is done. Then it is middleware's responsibility to pass that data to the third party system. When third party system sends you some data and then middleware pass you that data, then it will be your responsibility if you are receiving that data or not. Once you receive that data, it will be your responsibility to do the meaningful transformation of that data. But whatever is not in your control, like whatever happening inside the middleware, let's say if middleware is not able to pass that data to third party system, that is not your responsibility. That is something which middleware team need to figure it out. Okay. So as a Salesforce developer, we control our system. We do not control some other system. We do not control middleware. We do not control the third-party SAP system or ServiceNow system. So we will not take load of that. Whatever we can do from Salesforce is that we can pass data and we can receive data. If we are passing data, if middleware is able to receive the data, our job is done. Our job will restart again when middleware passes us a response back. Okay, so that is something which you need to be worried about in your project, not everything. So if your entire integration is not working, you need to figure it out where it is failing. If it is failing on the Salesforce end, then it is your responsibility. If it is not failing in the Salesforce end, then you have to figure out whether it is failing in the middleware or in the SAP or in the third party system. And then obviously you can help the teams to debug or understand, but your whole job will be to take care of the Salesforce system, not the other system. Okay. All right. Tell
So
me,
for the middleware, the endpoint will be their specific ID, right? If you're sending this thing to middleware,
they will
uh,
provide. it is
Okay.
their responsibility to provide you, and sometimes they will not even provide you any endpoint. They will just ask you, and they will pull the data directly. So it depends on middleware. They will provide you endpoint, they will create the connectors, they will create the connection between Salesforce and the middleware. So you need not to worry about it. Is their responsibility to provide you endpoints.
Okay, sir.
Okay, and middleware, see, MuleSoft work in a way is that, let's say you have to pass account data from Salesforce to SAP, and if middleware is in between, account is a standard data. There is no, you do not need any standard, you do not need to write any custom API. So they will be able to fetch it directly from your API. So they have connectors which they, sometimes create in the Anypoint Studio, and then that will fetch data automatically. You need not to do anything. You need not to write any class. You need not to do any call out. You need not to do anything if it is automated. And with the platform events as well, you can just publish a platform event, and your middleware will be able to subscribe to that and will pass on that data to the third party system. So it is very advanced in terms of it is automated most of the time. But to begin with, you need to understand how call out works, and what is the third party system, what is the third party endpoints and everything. So start with the basics, and then obviously you will learn different techniques. There are different techniques in the integration, which in the beginning you need not to worry about. Okay, in the beginning you need to only think about how do you do the call out and how you expose your API, because these two are the most basic things. And after that, when you actually work on a project, you will see different things and different techniques to do the integration. Okay, but basics remain same. One system is doing the call out, other system is exposing their API, other system is exposing API. That is why the one system is able to do the call outs, because when you expose your API, then only you create the endpoint for your other system to do the callouts. Okay, that is the basic, and that remains same even with any other tool as well. All right, are you able to see my PPT screen, or it is Salesforce screen?
Yes, PPT.
PPT, perfect. All right, so they sometimes ask in an interview what is the difference between SOAP and REST API. Okay, and when to choose SOAP API versus when to choose the REST API. So see, SOAP API is a traditional API, okay, which works on the XML, okay, XML format, whereas REST is a very lightweight API which works on the JSON as well as on the XML. Okay, JSON is very easy. When you read it, it becomes very easy for you to read and translate it. XML is also easy, but it is sometimes it could be a very large file which is very difficult to go through. So JSON is easier in comparison to XML, and REST APIs are easier and very lightweight in comparison to the SOAP API. So SOAP APIs are mostly used in large applications which are traditional applications and have been working for years, and very large enterprise. And REST is mostly used for the mid-scale applications and mobile devices, and all the latest devices, all the latest applications which we have, they are working towards the REST integration, because it is lightweight, it is easier to implement, and it is easier to manage. Whereas SOAP is more traditional, more fundamental, and it's you can say a bulkified approach which is a heavyweight approach. So works on the WSDL files. Okay, WSDL files are nothing but the web service description language. These are the XML formatted document, okay, which contains the information related to the class which you are exposing. Okay, so let's say you have created a web service, and then you will provide the WSDL to the other party system who is going to do the callouts, and then that system need to consume your WSDL file, and then that system need to do the callouts from it. Okay, so SOAP API integration works on the WSDL files, and WSDL files are basically XML formatted document which contains the information about your web service. Okay, there are two types of so even though there are multiple types of WSDL, there are two major types of WSDL, which are enterprise WSDL and partner WSDLs. And if I explain this, okay, enterprise visual versus part. See, this you only need to tell. I mean, these type of question will only come if you say that you know the basics of SOAP integration. If you are not going to say the basics of the SOAP integration, these types of question will not come. But this is if you are saying that you just know the basics of SOAP, then these kind of questions may come. So if you are going, I mean, depending on what you're planning to say in an interview, you can plan it. Enterprise visuals are the strongly typed visual files which are tied to a specific configuration of Salesforce. Okay, if you change, let's say you have configured for account object. Okay, you have exposed a web service. Okay, which contains the information related to account, and later on, if you added a new field on the account, then your whole visual will fail. The org which is using your WSDL file to do the callouts will not be able to do the callouts because the basic structure of account has changed, which will change the basic structure of the WSDL file. Okay, so then you have to regenerate the WSDL file and then again send it to the org which is going to consume your WSDL file. Whereas partner WSDLs are the loosely coupled WSDL files, which will not change even if you add a new object or new field or something. Okay, so this is the major difference between them. And see, if you're going to say you know the basics of SOAP integration, then you have to know very well that how you create the WSDL files and how someone else will consume the WSDL files. So if somebody want to learn that thing, I can send you some useful information. You can go through the blog or the video and you'll be able to understand that. But it is not recommended for any new person to say this because this contains a lot of tricky information, which if you do not know and you say in an interview, it may backfire for you. Okay, so depending on if you want, I can explain this more. Okay. All right, then comes the remote site setting. I have already shown you, I have already told you what is remote site setting. So whenever we are doing a call out to a third party system, we need to see that third party system will have an endpoint. Let's say we are calling an endpoint of www.google.com. Okay, so Salesforce will not allow you to do the call out unless you put that URL in the remote site setting. This is basically for the security reason, and you have to first add that endpoint in the remote site setting, and then only you will be able to do the call outs from your Salesforce org. Okay, so if you're calling a third party system from your Lightning Web Component or from your VF page or from your trigger, whatever it is, you have to add that endpoint to the remote site setting for the security purposes. And once you do that, then only you will be able to do the call outs. Okay. And then there is another thing called the name credential. So name credentials is also something which we can use to make the call outs. Okay, and in the name credential, what we do is that we basically create an auth provider where we put the username and client secret, client token, and password and everything. So in the call out code, you need not to do all those things manually. And if you are using the name credential, you can bypass the remote site setting and you need not to provide that endpoint URL to the remote site setting. So name credential will automate a lot of things for you, because otherwise all you in your call out code, you need to write the username, password, and send those things to the call out manually every time. And if anything changes in between, you will have to change your code. So that was a lot of heavy lifting, plus that was a bad code practices to do, and all those things in the code itself. Name credentials will automate your thing. Okay, a name credential specifies the URL of the callout endpoint, and it's required authentication. So not only the endpoint, but it also provides the required authentication parameter. Okay, what you need to do is that you need to get a you need to add an auth provider and endpoints and whatever you want to do and set it up, and then use that name credentials in your call out code rather than hard coding the third party endpoint and hard coding the username and password and client secret. You can do the name credential and it will make your job very easy. Okay, so difference between name credential and remote site setting is a very good and important interview question. But before that, let us also understand the benefit of name credentials. So name credentials specifies the URL of a callout endpoint and its required authentication. You can skip remote site settings. So they will ask you, if you are using name credentials, then also do you need to add the URL in the remote site setting? So you will say no. If you are using name credential, we can skip that part and we need not to add the endpoint in the remote site setting. Okay, because we have done everything in the name credential. Okay. Using name credentials, we can make a call out to an external system without supplying username and password in the code. Because in the name credential, you have used an auth provider which contains the username and password and authentication of it. You need not to add the username and password in your code. And that is a big advantage because it is a very bad practice to pass the username or password in your code, because this information will travel through the web. Okay, it will be traveled through the web, and there are chances that a hacker or scammers will try to get the hold of your username and password related information. So it is always a bad practice to pass the username and password related information in your code. Okay. By separating the endpoint URL and authentication from the callout definition, name credentials make callout easier to maintain. For example, if an endpoint URL changes, you update only the name credential, or all callout that reference the name credential simply continue to work. So it's a very good point. If you are using the name credential and let's say the endpoint changes, you just need to change the endpoint on the name credential. You need not to touch your code. And if there are n number of n number of classes using that name credential, you need not to go to each class and change that manually. You can just change it in once, and it will work for all the classes. Okay. It supports two types of authentication protocol: basic authentication, which is username and password, and OAuth authentication, which basically requires the client secret and consumer key. Okay. All right. Difference between remote site setting and name credentials. See, you have seen so many advantages and disadvantages, so you will be able to tell the difference now. But I have stated that in the clear fact that in the remote site setting, we specify the URL for the callout endpoint, and in the name credentials, we specify not only the URL but also the authentication related information. Okay. So as we only added the URL, we have to add the authentication related information manually in the Apex code. But here Salesforce manage the authentication. Okay. Obviously, maintenance is difficult because we are hard coding everything. Here, maintenance is easy. Implementation varies based on authentication required for each remote site setting, and it is irrespective, obviously. So a remote site setting versus name credential is a very important interview question, and make sure that you go through it. Make sure you try to create the name credential and try to create the remote site setting and see the difference by yourself. The link which I provided you for the crash course on the integration contains all these things. So if you have already gone through this, you will be able to understand everything, whatever I'm saying. If you have not, there is no problem. You can do that. You can go through that. That video is, I think, 1 hour long. And if you follow it, it may take you around 2 hours. But after that, you will be able to understand everything. And after that, you can go through all these questions. And I think you will be good enough for the basics of integration, and you will be able to explain. See, I'm not worried for the people who have worked on the integration, because those people who have already worked on integration will be able to explain everything, because their scenario itself will be self-explanatory, and the interview will be able to understand what they have worked on. I am worried for the people who have not worked on integration but plan to say that they know the basics of integration, because if you say that you do not know integration, that basically is a thing that if somebody comes with an integration experience, that will obviously have a better chances of selection than you. So I don't want you guys to say that you do not know integration. I at least want you all to say that you know the basics of integration. And whatever I'm doing this is for the people who are going to say that they know the basics of integration. So you should know the enough of the basics to cover the basics interview questions on the integration. See, if any difficult interview question comes on the integration, then it is okay if you're not able to tell. The expectation is not that you should know everything, but at least if somebody asks you what is name credential, why it is different from remote site setting, you should be able to explain it properly. That's what my intention is with this lecture. Okay. Then comes the connected app. What is connected app? Connected app basically is a framework which allows external applications to integrate and interact securely with the Salesforce using APIs. Let's say there is a third party system, uh, whatever, XYZ, and that system want to call Salesforce. So Salesforce is a secure system. Nobody, I mean, and anybody will not be able to call Salesforce unless Salesforce allow them to call. Okay, so Salesforce need to allow third-party system to be able to establish a connection with Salesforce and interact through the API. And connected app is a way by which Salesforce allows third-party system to connect, to make a connection with Salesforce and interact via API. So that is why we create a connected app. Okay. See, the org which is creating connected app will be different org, and the org which is doing the name credential and remote site setting will be different app. So connected app we only create when we allow any other system to access Salesforce. Remote site setting and name credentials we use when we call the other system. Okay. And if those two systems are the Salesforce system, then one will be creating connected app, other will be doing the name credential. Okay, don't get confused. It's not like they all need to be done in the same org. Connected app and remote site setting name credentials are two contradictory thing, and they will be done in the separate org. Okay, depending on the purpose. Okay. All right. What is OAuth? OAuth is an open standard framework used by Salesforce and many other applications to enable secure authorization and authentication between different systems. So it's an authentication protocol. It's an authentication and authorization framework which allows applications to authenticate each other properly. Okay. It provides a way for users to grant third-party applications access to their resources on their application without sharing their credentials. Okay. So if you are using OAuth 2.0, we need not to share the username and password directly, and we will be able to interact with each other. Okay, so authentication happens in the back end. We need not to do the username and password directly. When we create a name credential, when we create an auth provider, we provide the username and password, and authentication happens directly. But we need not to store those anywhere, and we need not to hold the information, and we need not to pass that information in our call out code. Okay. So Auth 2.0 is a very important thing you need to understand, and you also need to understand the flow of this. So they sometimes ask what is Auth 2.0 flow. I will write it down for you and will send it to you. Okay. This is an important interview topic, guys. All right. There are different authentication flows available inside Auth 2.0, and these are different tokens. Refresh token, web server authentication, username and password, and SAML assertion, SAML BRIS token. So there are different authentication mechanism available, and it is not entirely depend on you, like which one you want to use. It also depends on the other system as well, like which authentication they support. Okay, so most of the time you will be seeing, you see, username and password is a very basic. Okay, and a refresh token is something which you will be seeing a lot when you work on it. And there are information about each of this, but I only want people who actually want to learn it and want to explain it in an interview to go through this right now, because otherwise it will take a lot of time to get a hand on all these authentication flows. And from the interview point of view, you will not get much opportunity to explain these things. It's just that they'll say, have you worked on any authentication flow? And you can say that, yes, I have worked the, let's say, refresh token, or I have worked the web server authentication. It's just that you try to learn one or two and use that one or two and to explain in an interview. You need not to learn everything right now from the interview point of view. Obviously, from your learning point of view, you can learn all these things and try to get hand on information on that. But from the interview point of view, if you, even if you know just two of it, that will be sufficient for you to explain in an interview. All right. There are different Salesforce connectors available, Salesforce connectors available for you to connect Salesforce with other systems, and these connectors will not require you to write any code. Okay, so with the help of these connectors, you will be able to Salesforce with the external system without writing a single line of code. Okay, we have Salesforce Connect. Okay, Salesforce Connector allows you to integrate external data source with Salesforce without writing code, or without you being able to copy the data into Salesforce. It is really good. You need not to write any code. Basically, it uses a features called the external object. So with the help of external object, it fetches the data in your Salesforce platform without storing that data in the Salesforce system. So let's say you have your customer data or the customer's cases data available in the Salesforce, but you want to store it somewhere else. Okay, so because obviously you have a limited space in Salesforce, so you can store it somewhere in your third-party system, and then with the help of external object, you can fetch that data anytime you want to, but that data need not to be stored in Salesforce. So for that, we can use the Salesforce Connect. Similar to Salesforce Connect, we have the Marketing Connect and Heroku Connect as well. Applications built on Heroku can directly be connected with Salesforce via Heroku Connect, and we need not to write any code for that. And for the marketing automations as well, we have marketing connectors available, which will connect the data between Salesforce and the marketing tool. So these are related to the data connectors. We have MuleSoft Anytime platform. It's a middleware. Okay, and I was telling you that it automates a lot of things, is that you need not to write any single line of code. All you need to do is that provide a proper access to the user, which MuleSoft request, and then with the help of that user's credential, MuleSoft will be able to fetch the data directly without any code you need to write for that. Okay, so MuleSoft Anypoint platform is a very good tool, and it has a lot of connectors available, which will do a lot of automations for you. Okay, any MuleSoft developers we have in our circle? You guys have any MuleSoft developer as your friend? I'll take it as no. So we have, I mean, on the September 2, we are going to have a MuleSoft Dreaming I think in Delhi, and that will be a good event for all the MuleSoft developers and also for the Salesforce developers. And whenever you upskill, whenever you try to upskill yourself in the Salesforce, let's say you have learned all the basics of Salesforce and all, you want to learn some other tool, then MuleSoft is a very good tool. If you want to learn something new, MuleSoft, I will highly recommend you to learn MuleSoft. It's a really good tool. And if as a Salesforce developer, you also know the MuleSoft, that will be an added advantage for you. Not for right now, but in future, let's say 6 or 8 months down the line, you want to learn something new, you can pick up the MuleSoft. It's a good thing. Okay. There are various REST API methods. When we saw the example, we saw that there are HTTP GET, HTTP delete, HTTP post, and then we have HTTP patch and put as well. Okay, so sometimes in an interview, they ask you what are the different REST API methods available. In that case, you can explain that we have GET, delete, post, patch, and put. They sometimes ask you the difference between put and patch. So put is basically to update a record, whereas patch is basically to do the upsert. Okay, if record is already available, it will do the update. Otherwise, it will do the insert. So they sometimes ask the difference between put and patch. I have got this question multiple times during my interviews. So you should know that the difference between put and patch. And in general, you should know what the get, delete, and post do. All the other three are the self-explanatory, but these two sometimes confuses us. Okay. All right. Salesforce Connect, I have already told you. And if you want to understand more on the Salesforce Connect, I will obviously share this PPT with you. Okay. You can go through that. See, there is one term called Salesforce Connect and there is one term called Lightning Connect. So sometimes they ask you the difference between Salesforce Connect versus Lightning Connect. Salesforce Connect is a broader feature that encompasses various integration capabilities, while Lightning Connect is a specific implementation of the Salesforce Connect focused on OData integration. Okay, OData integration is an integration mechanism. Okay, and I will share some detail about OData as well. But for now, you understand that Lightning Connect is a part of Salesforce Connect itself, and Lightning Connect is just a subset of Salesforce Connect. Okay, and both features allow you to access and integrate external data into Salesforce, but Lightning Connect is specifically focused on integration or data-based external data in a simplified manner, leveraging the Lightning platform and user experience. Okay, so I will show you what is OData.
Mohit, could you explain more put and patch? It's only you just to mention a fully and partially recorded.
Do you understand the difference between update and upsert?
Not much.
Okay. Okay, I'll do that. Don't worry. Okay, OData basically is Open Data Protocol, enables the creation of REST-based data services, which allows resources using it. If you want to understand more about OData, you can learn through it. I will share the link, but I will also share a brief notes on this so that you guys can use that notes. Okay. MuleSoft versus Copado, which one we should learn? See, MuleSoft versus Copado are entirely two different things. Copado is basically for the deployments. MuleSoft is for the integration. So depending on what is your area of interest, both are really good. But I think MuleSoft will add more value and you should learn MuleSoft. But Copado, see, yeah, JWT flow is also one of the authentication flow. You can learn that. See, MuleSoft is for the integration purpose. So if somebody has around 3 years of experience and want to upskill, then it will be a good thing to learn MuleSoft. Copado on the other side is basically a deployment tool. There are various tools than Copado. So not Copado. I want you guys to learn the traditional DevOps, like how you do the deployment through the DevOps and use the Git, and how you create the different branches of your different org and do the deployment with the help of Git. So that is something I want you guys to learn. Copado or Flossom or any other tool are irrelevant if you know the basics of Git and how you do the deployments via the Git. Okay. All right. Yes, CSP trusted sites for LWC is basically when we do the callouts from the Salesforce, we also need to add the endpoint to the trusted sites as well to tell that this is a trusted site from Salesforce. Okay. As I told you, JWT flow is authentication flow, just like name credentials. There were different just a second. There were different R 2.0 authentication flows available. JWT beta token is one of it. And similar to that, there are different other tokens as well. Okay, and every one of these works very differently and have their own set of rules and set of procedures to do. So if you want to learn more in the details, Salesforce has a lot of information available, but this is only recommended for those people who are going to explain this in interviews, that I have done the integration through the JWT token, or I have done the integration through the refresh token. Most of the time we use the refresh token in the normal integrations. But if you want to learn, I can provide you some links, and you want to, like the Apex Hours also provide you the information about how JWT token works, the structure of it, and how you create the private key and these certificates and all. Okay, but what I want to show you is that it is really difficult to learn it practically, because you need to have another system as well which supports this, and then you will be able to do the call outs. So if you want to do this, blog is going to help you a lot. Do that.
So Mohit, from that list, which do you recommended us to learn?
Refresh token, name credential to begin with, sorry, name, your username, password, and the refresh
Mhm.
token are some very commonly available, and you will get a lot of examples of that. You will see the practical examples of that, and you will be able to use it in your practical examples. To begin with, these are really good, and you should be able to learn them. In the YouTube also, if you see the integration videos, you will be seeing the authentication and authorization through these only. And if you learn the basics of it, then that will set a good platform for you to learn the advanced one. Okay, so that is why I want,
Okay.
uh, if somebody is beginner, I want them to start with the named username and password flow, and then use the refresh token one, and then go for the advanced flow like JWT token and couple of others. Okay, because much practical examples are not available for other. So if you use this, you will have to use the postman to check that, because other system, you see in the integration, the only problem is that either you get the APIs which are publicly available, so there is no authentication and authorization involved, they are freely available everywhere. Or if they are not, if they are, even if they are there is an authentication, the basic authentication will be. So to learn these things is bit complex, and you will have to use the postman and all those things to do the authentication and authorization. But first you learn the basic, then only you go to advanced topic. Okay, and those who know the basics can obviously go to advanced topic directly and learn it. Salesforce has a lot of information available about all the types of flows, all the types of authentication flows. So it's not like information is not available. Information is there, but just the practical implementation is a bit complex, and you will not find so many examples for that. So that is why we go with the basic one from the interview point of view. But from the learning point of view, if you are doing it for your learning, and if you are going through everything on the integration, then obviously you will learn this as well. And um, obviously you will create an example for this as well. So go to official Salesforce documentation and see all these things there. We have all the authorization flows available, and you will be able to learn all these things. Okay, let me also.
Okay. Uh, And one more thing, Mohit. Once in interview, I got this scenario that client don't want to share the username and password with whole team, but they can only share with manager. Now, how manager will deal with this situation so that developer can access in the code, but they cannot read it. So for this, name credential is the uh,
Yes, we should
right
use the name
choice.
credential. We should use the name credential. We should allow name credentials, and in the name, see what manager need to do is that he need to create an auth provider. Okay, when we create an auth provider, we do the authentication on the Salesforce itself. Like when you click on the auth provider, let me show you. So if I create an auth provider, if I create an auth provider. See, it will ask you which kind of auth you are providing, for which tool you are providing auth. So it supports so many different tools we normally connect with Salesforce. If we choose Salesforce, let's say our third party system is Salesforce itself, then it will ask you to provide the name. Let's say, um, okay, and it will ask you to provide the consumer key and consumer secret, which you have created on this org. Okay, the connected app. So once you create a connected app, you will give that consumer key and consumer secret here. Okay, and once you give the consumer key and consumer secret, it will once you save it, it will ask you to authenticate it with the username and password as well. So let me also create a consumer key first. This is my other org.
Uh, so Mohit, like whenever something like regarding not readable, so at that time we should explain that concept, right? Decryption ones, that blob, binary large variable and all, or
Sorry,
because at that time,
can you repeat the question?
yeah, so like whenever something is like a user cannot read, or we need to hide, so at that time we need to explain that concept, right? Decryption one, that
Right.
we can encrypt certain things, and that using binary large variable, that blob variable and
Right.
all.
See, whenever we are passing some critical information like credit card information or something, we have to encrypt it properly so that it should not be visible to everybody. And if, this is one thing you can normally do it by encrypting and decrypting it. The other thing is that we have, the Salesforce Shield, which is one of the product of Salesforce, which basically encrypt and decrypt all the critical fields and all the critical information. It is an automated thing, so it will automatically identify which field requires encryption and decryption. So you can also learn something about Salesforce Shield as well. Okay,
Okay.
connected app I am creating for. Okay, and it will provide me the client secret and consumer key, and I will provide it here and save it. Once I save it, it will ask me to provide the username and password for this org. Okay, so that it will have the authentication, directly without providing username and password here and without storing it anywhere. So that is how we can do the authentication without providing the username and password, without storing the username and password anywhere, and it will be authenticated automatically. Let's say after we authenticated, we change the password for the user, then this authentication will fail, and if you do try to do the integration, it will not fetch the correct result because authentication is failed.
So still, as a developer, we can access it, right? I mean, though it's a not readable format, but like we can
Yeah,
access like
see,
label. So
obviously,
similarly,
if the developer who is doing the integration, obviously he will be able to. I mean, without doing the using the password and username, you will not be able to do the authentication. So if your developer is creating an auth provider, he will have to, he need that information to authenticate. Otherwise, he will not be able
no,
to.
no. So like first time setting, always manager will do. Okay, but now whatever integration regarding code is there, so
Hmm.
those code will be written by developer, right?
Yeah,
So
but
how can developer access this particular like shield, that username, password, and all?
See, we are not storing it anywhere. We are not storing it anywhere. So that is not stored anywhere. So what is the requirement? Do you want developer to have username password, or you don't want the developer to have username or password?
No, so he said that like only one time client don't want to share with developer, so he can share only with manager. Now manager will do something, so
Hmm.
developer can access, but it is not in the readable format. So like for an example, inside the label we store something, right? So still we can access label inside the
Mhm.
code, right?
Mhm.
So it's like similarly, it is not in the readable format, but still developer can access in the code. So I said encryption concept and I have explained all this, but yeah, it was
If
wrong.
if you provide the auth provider and the store the authentication, username and password will not be stored anywhere. Username and password, developer will not be able to access the username and password in the call out code, because username and password has not been stored anywhere. This authentication has been done on this Salesforce screen, this org's Salesforce screen. The username and password is not stored anywhere. Even the developer who is doing the call out can directly use the name credential, but will not be able to use the username and password directly. Okay, and that is the whole purpose of it, is that we are not storing it anywhere. So in your interview question, what was he expecting you? Like developer should not be able to read it, or what he was expecting in the interview?
Yeah, so he said that developer cannot read it, but while writing the code, he can access. So it is not in the readable format. So it may be, like kind of some
He, so,
encryptions.
so he wanted that to be in the readable format. What was his ultimate result by that question?
So his reason was like client don't want to share with the entire developer team. He just
Okay.
only want to share with manager, only like with one
He shared,
person.
he shared it with manager now.
Correct. And after that he said that, so like developer cannot read like what is the username and password,
Okay.
but they can access inside the dev console. So at that time it's not in the readable format, but still they can access and write the code.
So what he want is after that, yeah, he can access that. Now, what does he want? It should be in the readable format, or it should not be in the readable format, or he should not be even able to access it at all.
No, so developer can access but not in the readable format.
I think for
Only
this,
manager knows that.
like
Actually, the final
encryption
question is,
holds good.
see,
Sorry,
I'm,
sorry to interrupt.
yes, Santosh,
Yeah,
I understand, but I'm not
yeah. Like I think this.
question here. Like whatever he's telling that he's not able to see it in the readable format, that is what he's telling you. What is the question behind it? Like why he's not able to see it in the readable format, or how he should be able to see it in the readable format? What was his question?
Yes, so he just gave me like only one scenario that let's say like client have shared the username and password. Okay, now they don't want to share with entire developer team. He just only share with manager. Now manager will hide, or they will do something so that developer can access inside the dev console, but they cannot read it the exact what is the username. Like it is not in the readable format, but still developer can access it and write code and like do all the stuff.
Okay.
I think Mohit, like encryption holds good. Looks like here. So maybe SHA 16 or something. Some encryptions are there, right? We can use that one or generate a key. Or, like on the other side, like while they are decrypting, they can make use of some key not to decrypt that. I think that is the only thing it holds for this situation, which I feel.
See, the developers will be the person who will be doing the encryption and decryption. If they'll hide it from the developer, who will do that?
Right, but so maybe he gave me this scenario just to only like verify, I mean just to confuse me, but it was the exact statement that developer cannot read it.
Okay.
So is it possible like we can store the credential in like in customer data settings and like we can use that?
Sorry, where you want to explore store it?
Is it possible to store that in customer data setting we can protect the username and password to see from the other users, right?
Yep, you can store. See,
So
if it is developer in the question that we don't want to share it with, obviously developers will be able to see that. If we are going to hide it from the developers itself who are going to use that thing, then that beats the whole purpose. Getting my point?
hmm. Sir, maybe the interviewer was asking about the admins. Admin can able to access, but not the users which who have other profiles. Am I right, Preeti? I think so.
Yes, so it's not about profile, it's about either it's admin or manager. So
See,
only one person can see it, but not the entire development team.
see, we have created an auth provider here. Okay, we have created an auth provider. Okay, and we have created a connected app in other org. Okay, now if I go to now, what we need to do is that should we call that URL? Let me just set it here. Just a second. All right, so we have created an auth provider. We have not provided username, password anywhere. Now we will go to create a name credential. Authentication, I will use auth 2.0. The moment I use auth 2.0, it will ask me which auth providers you want to. So we will choose the auth provider we have created recently. Okay. And in the scope, we have to, I think, give the default, but let's save it. See, there is some error happening and but what happens normally in this step is that it will give you a Salesforce login screen where you will provide the username and password of this org. Okay, and then the authentication will be done and you will be able to use this name credential directly in your callouts. Okay, so that's how it works. You will not store username password anywhere. Okay, so in your scenario, Preeti, if they are not comfortable in sharing the username and password with developers, then they can provide it to manager. Manager will set it the name credential and auth provider once, and then manager will ask developer to use this name credentials which he create in this step directly in their integration. They need not to pass their username and password, and username and password is not stored anywhere in the Salesforce. Okay, so that is how we can
Okay.
use it. So even
Okay, I got it. Thank
and
you so much.
and if they say that they are able to access the username and password, but that is not in the readable format, yes, that can be done with the help of encryption and decryption. But these things are done by the developers itself, like they encrypt and decrypt the sensitive information. So if they are hiding it from the developers itself, then they need to identify who is going to do the encryption and description. If it is the manager, if the manager is capable to do the encryption and description, then obviously he can do that, and the other people will not be. But most of the time we do not hide these things from the developers, because the developers are the one who are going to use these things. Okay, but obviously in a sensitive scenario, if that is the case, then see, but if a developer, see, if a person has set up information, then he can do a lot of things. Like you either hide the setup information. If developer tries to fetch sensitive information, then obviously he will be able to do that. Somebody who has encrypted can decrypt as well, unless you put a code or which is very 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 secretive between only few users, then I think that is possible. Otherwise, we do not hide these things from the developers. Like developers are the one who implement these things. So that beats the purpose if we hide it from the developers itself. But using the name credentials, we can avoid this step of storing the username and password in the Salesforce. Okay, so you can.
Okay.
All right. So after that, see, one question is that what is bulk API? Okay, bulk API we covered in the last session as well. Bulk API is basically when we have to deal with a large set of data and perform the load of that data. We use it in the data loader. There is one interview question comes from it, is that what is the parallel mode versus serial mode? Okay, so when we process the data in the via the bulk API, it works in the parallel mode. Okay, bulk API by default, bulk API records a process using parallel mode. When multiple records are processed in multiple batches, it might throw a record log or record lookup issue. So there is an option to change it to the serial mode. Record lookup is the issue when record. To avoid that situation, we can go with the serial mode, or we can organize related record in same batch. Okay, so to avoid the record lock issue, we can use the serial mode, which will basically run records in a serial manner rather than in the parallel manner. Okay, serial mode processing is only possible in the bulk API version 1.0. Bulk API 2.0 only process records in the parallel mode. So then if we are using the bulk API 2.0, then we only have one option to make sure that our data set is created in a way that it will not throw a record lock issue. So sometimes they ask what is parallel mode and what is serial mode. Okay, and when to use which one. There is another integration happens via Salesforce to Salesforce. Okay, if you have to connect two different Salesforce org, we can use this feature via Salesforce, and it does not require any custom code, and it does not require any middleware. It does not require anything. It just connects two different Salesforce org. You need to enable the feature, and then you can use it. You need to uh, tell it which object you want to sync and what you want to sync, which field you want to sync and all. And it in the backend works on the event driven architecture, and asynchronously it syncs data from one org to other org. So this is also sometimes they ask in an interview, because Salesforce focuses on integration without writing code. Okay, so all the options available on the integration without writing code becomes really important from the Salesforce point of view. And depends, see, integration question depends on the interviewer, what kind of integration he has worked on. Obviously, he will ask the question from the integration scenarios where he has worked on. So uh, we need to know these things, and if they ask you what are the other options available in the integration, you can say that Salesforce Connect and Heroku Connect are the options where we need not to write code. If you have to connect between two Salesforce or without writing code, we can also use Salesforce to Salesforce feature and use it. I have not used it. I think we need to pay something for to use the Salesforce to Salesforce feature. Uh, but I'm not entirely sure on this. I have never used Salesforce to Salesforce, but it is very easy. If you want to learn it, it is very easy. But I think once I was exploring this option and somewhere I saw that this is a paid feature. So I think then we went ahead with the free options available and we use platform events to do that. All right. Outbound messages, you all know that was a workflow features by which we used to do the outbound. We used to send messages to the third party system. Okay. How many callouts we can have? There are 10 callouts we can have in a single Apex transaction, not more than that. What is the maximum allowed time limit to make the call out to external service is 120 seconds. Okay, if it is taking more than time, then you will get the timeout error. What is the default timeout period for calling web service from Apex? It is 10 seconds. Okay. And can we define custom timeout for each call out? Yeah, a custom timeout can be defined for each call out. The minimum is 1 millisecond and the maximum is 120. So sometimes they ask questions related to the timeout. I have seen these questions a lot. Maximum is 120, default is 10 seconds. And we can set the custom timeout as time call out as well. Custom time for the call outs as well, which can be vary between 1 to 120 milliseconds, 120 seconds. Okay. So these are the basic questions on the integration I wanted to cover. I will share the PPT with you all. And see, if you have not gone through that, the video I shared you here on, I think on Sunday, please go through that. That will ask you to do a lot of practical things. And it is very important to do the practical things in interview in the integration to have weight on your answers in the interviews. Otherwise, whatever you will say, you will not say with the confidence. You will just say from the definition point of view, and interviewer will be able to predict that and will be able to ask more tough questions. So try to do some practice on the integration because it requires some practice, basic practice. And that video basically contains a very basic scenarios, which I think will be good for you to do the practice. Okay. All right, guys, I think that should be all for today's session and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Feel free to ping me. See, the only problem is that because my phone is not working, sometimes I ping what on the WhatsApp via my wife's phone. So, and when I'm in front of laptop, I can access my WhatsApp, but not after that. So that is why I think that will be sorted in a day or two and we'll resume the older setup. Okay.